resonant audience. But from there, it's the goal should be to build a community who will help share and amplify it. I've been looking at some old videos of Rand's going back, 7, 8 years, and that's one of the things he has continually talked about. But I feel like we get away from that. I feel like we just producing content to produce content, and I feel like it's right on our nose. So whenever I talk to people or whenever I share ideas, whether it's one-on-one or at a small group or large group, I always say think content, audience, community.
That's true, yes. So main Moz blog, you just spoke of creating content for the sake of content, but does that happen on the main blog as well, or do you have a content calendar that you rigorously, religiously follow, or?
Yeah, and that's managed by someone else, but there's a calendar associated with it, and while there's no hard and fast template for the type of content that we want to run there. The biggest thing is quality and novelty. High quality and something everybody wouldn't have seen. That's what really puts you on the main blog.
Okay, guys. Everybody who just joined us, we haven't started yet. This is just a small chat. If a small chat that good, you can imagine how good it's gonna be webinar. Okay, we have more guests, so I'll start from the very beginning. We have Ronell Smith today, or tonight, depends where you are. We have Ronell Smith. He is Moz team member. But Ronell, you don't base in Seattle, do you?
I'm based in Texas.
Texas. Okay. Great. So I'll go usually from my left to my right. Okay. We have Amel.
Hi, everybody.
Amel's gone. I don't know. Amel, I cannot see you for some reason. What's with your camera? I just saw you. Okay. Let's go. Okay. Amel.
Hi, everybody.
I don't know what's funny. Okay, we can see Amel. I can see you in a small screen, but for some reason when I go on a big screen, I cannot see you. Okay, we have Amel. She is SEO from Canada. She is very regular here. But Amel, I think you're regular everywhere. How much energy do you have? When do you sleep? Because I can see you on so many big events.
You can hear me well?
Yeah, I can hear you.
All right, good. Well, that's the thing. I try to be everywhere where it's like an interesting topic or interesting webinar, and learn, share my knowledge, and that's what I like to do. And it's all about positioning in a way. So that's good. That it means that what I'm doing is right because you see me everywhere, and that's what I wanted to do when I started doing this. So.
Okay, we have Amel from Canada. So next one, and his camera works fine, is Bohdan from Lviv, which is Western Ukraine. Western Ukraine is here as well. I'm in Kiev. He's a bit western than I am now. So Bohdan is from Lviv. He is a social media marketer from Lviv. Okay, next one. We have Kristin Drysdale. Kristin, don't be shy. Say something.
Hey, something.
Okay. So, about Kristin, what I have to say, there is quite famous elite, I would say, elite bogus hangouts, which is Amon Jones and Bill Slavsky. Obviously, Amon Jones and Bill Slavsky ring a bell to any SEO lovers, and not very many permanent members, I would say. So, and Kristin is a permanent member there. So, bogus hangout, Kristin Drysdale.
I get to learn a lot. I'm very fortunate.
Okay, next guest, we have Moosa Hemani. Moosa is prolific blogger and actually in a way colleague of today's speaker. Moosa, okay, not a team member of Moz, but Moosa published a lot of stuff in Moz. Yeah, recently was an article on e-commerce, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, correct?
Yeah.
And he does great work.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, next one we have our guest from India, and it's Rohan Ayyar, and okay, he represents E2M solution. Rohan, what's your line of expertise as SEO?
More of SEO, yes, but I wear multiple hats. Everyone at E2M does everything. I mean, content, SEO, a bit of PPC. We are all just everybody does everything over here.
Okay.
So it depends
Today,
on what the client wants.
today I guess it's all about this man, and it's all about content marketing. So we have Ronald Smith from Moz. Moz, well, for me means quality, okay. Ronald already said he's not based in Seattle. He's based in Texas, which is much hotter, I guess. There. Okay. So, well, I don't know. Content is king. Content is not king. I don't know. Well, we will find out within what, I don't know, 30 minutes, 45 minutes. So everyone who join us, just join us. In a minute, we'll start our presentation. If anybody wants to say anything, Amel, how's your camera? Yeah, your camera is fine.
So
now we
can
can
you
see
hear
you.
me too?
Yeah, we can
Alright,
see
cool.
you now. Yeah, okay, great. If anyone wants to say anything before Ronald will start presentation? No? Nothing? Nothing? Okay, so Ronald, is content still king?
No.
No, okay, his content is not king.
Fine.
Yes, this
Yeah.
is, yeah, okay. Okay, Ronald, it's all yours.
Okay. Well, like I said, I'm excited to see everybody here, and this is something I've been eager to talk about for a while. Let me know that you can see that. Okay. Just a second. Can you see that fine?
Yeah, it's all great. Go ahead.
You can see.
Okay. This is one of my favorite movies. It's an old movie with Samuel L. Jackson. For whatever reason, I get these slogans in my head, and this one stuck with me. During this scene, he's lying to the guy and saying that he's a Marine, and they go, "Oorah!" I don't know why that stuck in my head, but it stuck in my head for years, and it became one of those goofy sayings that I throw out there from time to time. Here's another one from one of my favorite movies from the 90s, Heat. He looks, Pacino is looking at Val Kilmer and says, I remember when I was in the pen and this guy told me that to never get attached to anything you couldn't walk away from in 30 seconds flat. If you see the heat coming around the corner, again, that's one of those crazy sayings. I don't know why I say it, but I went through a period where I just said it continually. This movie just haunts me, and I'm sure this face haunts many of you as well. But this is from Hannibal Lecter, and this is Mason Verger, a guy who, psychologist. He was a psychologist to this patient, and subsequently destroyed his face. And I don't know why, but there was a scene where this guy says to his doctor, "Will you stick around to watch Hannibal Lecter be tortured?" They had caught him. And the doctor says, I wish I could, but I can't. And he says, "Cannot or will not." And the camera panned in really tight onto this face. And I remember thinking, who could say no to that face? What's significant about that was that saying stuck in my head for years. I saw this movie over 5 years ago, and I can't shake why I can't get rid of saying cannot or will not. And I realized last week, truthfully, why it is. Cannot and will not is what I end up saying to marketers at brands all across the country every single day. Whether it's the CEO, CMO, a marketer, a content writer, I always end up saying to them that you can be successful at content marketing. You just have not yet. And in most cases, that's because they're choosing the wrong goals. If you look at this graph here, producing content is the single biggest problem that most content marketers face, or at least they say they face. My problem with that is, even if they solve for producing engaging content, most of them won't be successful, because producing engaging content, what does that really mean? And if they're able to produce that, the key would be then, for the right audience, for what specific personas in that audience do you target specific content, and then are you building a community around that content? And so what I like to say is that's a problem. It's not your biggest problem. And so to me, engagement is a poor choice for a goal. And it's not just a poor choice. We have to think about what does engagement really means. It means somebody took an action. You know, they clicked on your image, they clicked on the website, they took some action relevant to your product or service. But in many cases, that's not going to be a meaningful enough action for you to derive a great deal of benefit from. And so by focusing so much on engagement at the detriment of other areas, I feel like we're digging ourselves a steep hole. But if you look here, it's B2B and B2C. Producing engaging content is continues to be an albatross around the necks of marketers. And this was a study done by Forrester a couple of years ago, 2014, and it says 87%, as we can see there, say engaging content is a major challenge. And again, the problem there is if they solved that problem, the subsequent problems that they're really facing, but that are really keeping them from success, would still wouldn't be solved, and they'd have even bigger problems. This is the one that really shocked me and stopped me in my tracks, and I wrote about it a couple of years ago. You know, based on this Forrester study, by their own admission, B2B content marketers, 96% are flopping. Only 4% felt like they were doing a really good job. And so what I say to that is, you know, we have to stop digging the hole we're digging, and if we're in that hole, we have to get out of it. And the way to get out of it is by realizing that engagement should be a goal. It shouldn't be the goal. And we all know how it happens. Somebody says, you know, we want to get into content marketing. The next thing is we got a blog. The next thing is how many times should we blog? What should we blog about? And that's the beginning. But for too many marketers, that's really the end. That's where it all stops. And we have to go beyond that. And the way we go beyond that is by saying that we're going to start with engaging content, yes, but we're going to use the time that we gain from focusing on just engaging content to learn about the other areas, the other avenues that will ultimately lead us to success with marketing. This is Avinash Kaushik. Many of you know who he is. You've probably seen him on various presentations. He said something that was so interesting a couple of years ago. It opened my eyes at MozCon when he talked about we have to focus on the things that will ultimately lead us to be successful. But in this quote, I think he says it all. When he talks about engagement is not a core metric, it's an excuse. And he was a lot less nice in the next graph. I chose not to put it up, but he basically says it's a way for lazy marketers who are unwilling or who can't define what their brand stands for. And what he says, and it's so true, you have to begin, before you have that brand promise, you have to have a brand goal. You have to say, this is what my brand stands for, and be willing to stand on that. Not, I'm going to create content for some invisible audience. And I think that's so key. I wish more marketers would heed this message, would read it and then heed it. And we all know how it starts. Once we get the engaging content, what we typically do is we spy on the competition and we say, okay, they're in our vertical, they're doing well, let's see their most popular content. We look at the title, we look at the number of shares. Then the next thing we do is we go to Google and we say we want to produce a piece of content around this. Who has the most, not the most powerful domains, but who has the content that's ranking highest? And then we say, you know what? I think we can produce content that bests that. So we get to go, we send these ideas to our content team, to our marketing team, and we say, produce something that's better. So then what we do, we look at a tool like Open Site Explorer, and we see who's linking to that content. After we produced our content, we reach out to them, to the people who are linking to this other content, and say, you know what? What about linking to us? What about providing a link to our content? It goes far and beyond what Buffer or whoever else we're copying goes. So use our content instead. And the problem there is that it's so easy for anybody to do that, and that's the muck and mire we're all stuck in. We're all copying one another, but we're not copying things that are going to help us be successful. And so what I say to marketers is, going back to that engaging, if you just want to produce engaging content, yeah, absolutely, copy what the competition is doing. Look to see what they're doing. The problem is you won't know how effective they're being. You won't know if they've moved on to something else. So it's essential that you begin by saying, you know, this is my brand, here's where I stand, here's what I'm going to hang my hat on. And that begins with trust. That begins by you establishing with your audience, a core of that audience that you want to build a community from, that I want you to trust me, and I'm going to produce content only for you. And the way to do that is to think in terms of the brands that are really endearing to you now. Who are the brands that you trust, that you feel good about, that you feel safe on their website from the standpoint they're not going to spam you, they're not going to overmarket you, they're not going to oversell you. They're going to produce the content that you know is going to be relevant and resonant to you. And what I say that the beginning with that is to build what I like to call positive ubiquity, where wherever your brand is talked about, or wherever brands similar to yours are being talked about, there's a positive association with what you're creating. Positive association with the sales team, the marketing team, the content you produce, a positive brand association. And the way to think about that is anytime somebody has a positive experience at your company or with your service, with your product, that you should ask them for a review, or you should be able to ask them for a review. If you can't, that's a problem. We have to remember that primarily people leave reviews with really bad or really great service. So if you're somewhere in the middle, you left out. But the people who get really bad service, that one time you don't serve somebody as well as you thought you should, or the one time your product doesn't perform as well as it should, they're going to leave a bad review. So if you're not courting people who will leave great reviews, all you have is negative reviews. And so that's a great starting point. But think in terms of how can we build positive ubiquity? How can we leave anybody who interacts with our product or service a positive association with them? And so a great way to start that is to think in terms of being there for them. One of the missing components, one of the missing elements of content marketing is helping. Too often we want to be heroes. Too often we want to save the day for an individual. But in reality, somebody wants to be a better version of themselves. They want to be better today than they were yesterday. So if you can help them, you can solve a problem, you can answer a question. And that's where, especially as a small and mid-sized business, you can say, okay, here are the questions that are being asked online, in search, in social, in our content, through our comments. Here's the comments we're going to ask. What we need to answer, because these are the questions that are being asked. But going beyond that, digging into the community, getting on Google+, getting on Facebook, getting on Twitter, looking at what's being discussed more broadly, not just on about your product or service, but about similar products or services. Answering those questions, being the help that the people in your vertical who are being served by your vertical need. The example I love to make is Steve Jobs. When the iPhone came out in 2005, people who were familiar with Steve Jobs were going to buy that product regardless because they loved him. They remember the old Macs that they may have had or their parents had. And so there was this positive human association that he built into that phone. And people forget, Apple is a phone company now, but it wasn't a phone company then. It was all about the iPod. It was all about Macs, the iMacs. But he humanized a product. And the same thing can happen with our products and services. Another one is Allstate. If you watch any sports on Saturday, you typically see this, especially in the States, you see this goofy guy who's always sowing some destruction. And it makes anybody who's a homeowner aware that, you know what, if I own a home, there's always going to, or a vehicle, there's always going to be things that are happening. And Allstate is making people aware that, you know what, you're always safe with us. If you have us, no matter what happens, we're going to take over. We're going to be there for you. Another example is this guy, Blendtec. I love smoothies. I love protein shakes. A couple years ago, I was looking for the perfect perfect smoothie maker. And I needed one that was really powerful. I had gone through 11 smoothies in 1 year, and I was like, oh my gosh, I got to figure out a way to stop wasting all this money. I go on YouTube, and my question was, what will blend anything? And this guy, through his videos, through his website, answers the question behind them. Will it blend? And so you can think, will it blend what? Well, he has in videos blending marbles, blending iPhones, blending pieces of metal. So that got me to thinking, if it'll blend an iPhone, if it'll blend marbles, it'll obviously blend the most potent thing I have to put in it, which is frozen fruit, which is really, really tacky. And once it adheres with the ice, it's tough to break apart. It's almost like cracking a piece of metal. And so by him showing me that his product could do precisely what I wanted to do through his videos. He answered the seminal question I had, and so I went out and bought his blender. We can do the same things. So he was the public face of a seemingly faceless product, and he answered the question. So he was there to help me. One of the things, this study was reported on UMass last year, and it was really eye-opening, and it highlighted how even if you're not a strong brand who can get to page 1 or in the top 10, there's still opportunities. As you can see, things don't really fall off as far as the number of clicks until around 14. From 1 down to 10, you still have a fair amount of traffic. You still have a fair amount of clicks. So what that says is if you can get on the first page, if you can get in the top 20, and you can be a brand that people recognize and have a positive association with, they'll click on your product, on your link, and because they have a favorable opinion of your product or service, and over time, that you at position 14 or you at position 10 could inch up to the 7s, to the 4s. You may not be able to produce enough content. There's probably some really strong competition up top, really powerful domains. You may never get to that top spot, and that's true for most of us. We're never going to get to the top 1, 2, or 3. But if you produce a great product or service, and you work your butt off to have positive associations around that product or service, people will go down for you. People will go down and click because they recognize you for what you've done for them, and they'll reward you for those efforts. And so this study really opened my eyes that we don't have to be in the top 5 positions or the top 1, 2, or 3 positions, or even the top 10 positions. If we can just think in terms of getting on the first or second page, there's still clicks there for us. But it comes because of helping, creating a positive association. And that's really what we have to focus on. So I'm a big believer in making trust work for your brand, and I say that because there's no way around it. We have to focus on being a brand. We have to focus on being a trusted brand. So what I like to say is, how can we do that? Instead of thinking about just blogging, maybe you have somebody who's great at video, and you have an iPhone, and you can get lighting and a stand for $500 or $600, and you can produce weekly videos that answer those questions that would normally be answered on your blog through text. Look at the tools you have, look at the talents you have, and use them effectively. It doesn't have to be a text blog. It can be video. Another avenue a lot of people are going down, and I really like it. Look at podcasts. It's a great way to interview influencers who likely share your content. It's a great way to pull yourself away from thinking just about text. It's great to have in your repertoire to see if, how well text performs, how well video performs, how well audio performs. But it's a great way to use the tools and the talent that you have. So stop thinking about just text or just video or just audio. Think about having a repertoire of tools. Hilton is not a brand I typically think about that does a great job in search and social and content, but I love what they do. Hilton Hotels has a team of people all throughout the world where if you go on Twitter and you ask a question, they'll answer it, even if you're not staying at a Hilton property. So it may be a restaurant question. It may be another hotel question. It may be questions about the city you're staying in. If you at Hilton Suggest, they'll typically find an answer or find someone who can provide an answer. And that's that help component. I want us to remember, help in a lot of ways is that first entry point. If you can be helpful to somebody, that puts you on their radar. That puts you in their area of, you know what? I remember they were helpful to me. I'm going to reach back and look out for their content. I'm going to look out for the people that are representing their brand, whether at a show, at a various events, online, on their blog. They may not visit your blog initially, but they'll look out for you by sharing your content. And I've seen the same thing happen with Hilton, where people are sharing the good news that Hilton Suggest is providing by highlighting Hilton hotels in various cities where they've helped people. I know this sounds like a lot of work, and typically when I'm talking to a marketer, the first thing they say is, I don't have the team, I don't have the people in place. That sounds great, Ronell. I can't do all those things. And that's true. And what I like to say to that is, you don't have to do it, but somebody else will. So why not you? And to me, that's the key. If you're given a playbook, and this is the things I'm sharing here are things that I've learned from other marketers, things I like to say that I'm a huge stealer of ideas. These are the things that I share, that I see other brands being successful by doing and with, and I like to highlight you can do the same things, and all it takes is test, 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 test. So here's where the journey typically begins, right? It's all about the shares. It's all about who's reading and sharing our content. But that's not enough. We have to think in terms of if the goal is to go from content to audience to community, we have to find a way to optimize for that. And BuzzFeed, of all platforms, opened my eyes and has opened a lot of people's eyes, including at Moz, about the way to do this. Now, I know we know BuzzFeed is this brand, this blog that shares a bunch of stupid cat gifs, but they actually have a really cool data team. And so a couple of years ago, they came up with something that's really cool, and it's called the Process for Optimizing and Understanding Network Diffusion. And that sounds really complicated, but really what it is a way to understand how content is shared online. It used to be that we thought a Facebook share becomes a Facebook like, becomes another Facebook share, becomes another Facebook like, a Pinterest pin becomes another pin, a Twitter share becomes a favorite, becomes another favorite, becomes another share, and becomes another tweet. But really what happens is, what they found is a Twitter share becomes a Facebook like, becomes a Facebook post, becomes a link, becomes a Pinterest pin. So there's all this jumping around of content. It's not a share to a link. It's not a share to a link to a website. It's not a share to a click. It's jumping from site to site. And so what that tells us is, and this is an example of a visual representation of it, where the dark blue is Facebook, the light blue is Twitter, and the white is links. So what this highlights is the way that we should be producing content should be different. We should be thinking in terms of not just building a hub of content on our website and then producing links to it. We should think in terms of building links and shares out to other content. And I know that's anathema to the way that we think about it. But if we think in terms of we share our content, we share other people's content, that comes back to us. It makes sense when we think about it. It's just different from the way we've thought about it. We've all thought about, now we have the content, we got to build links back to it. But if we share it, we optimize our content for sharing, producing the types of content that's most likely to be shared in our vertical and for our brand, the links come back organically. And that's eye-opening. That's really eye-opening to a large extent. And so that's what we have to think about in terms of what should be our goal, what should get us beyond this content demise. And the way to think about it is loyalty for our content is ultimately what we're after. And that's a huge, huge issue for a lot of people who are producing content. Most people who produce content don't produce it with a goal in mind. And the first thing we begin talking about is, before you produce content, you should have a goal. It shouldn't be a goal for the audience, to be a goal for the brand. And the goal for your brand, as far as content, should be to produce content loyalty. And we'll talk about how to do that in a second. Matthew Brown, who is one of my favorite Moz teammates, a simply brilliant guy, an amazing SEO, amazing data person, had a great quote last year from MozCon, where he talked about the shortest path to sustainable content strategies to produce content loyalty. And what he's basically saying there is, and what we're going to talk about is, if you can create content that people come back to continually over and over, all the other things happen organically. The links, the shares, the conversions, whatever it is your business goal, has to take a backseat to what your content goal is. If you're in content marketing, I want to be clear about that. If you're a content marketer, you have to have a goal for your content in addition to a goal for your brand. So this was an interesting study that Parsley did last year, and Parsley analyzed thousands of websites, billions of web pages, and what they found was that for the average piece of content, 2.6 days is the lifespan, and that's for a piece of optimized content. After 2.6 days, everything falls off a cliff. So you get all these links and sharing, 2.6, bam, everything goes away. And if you have a social hit, you have a little bit longer, 3.2 days. So that's all the time you have to play with. You have to make hay. And when you think about all the time that goes into design and creation, sharing, that's not a lot of time. That's not a lot of benefit for your resources. So the way to think about that is, what they found is 11% of all the billions of pages, the thousands of websites, only about 11% of their viewers would be considered loyal. And loyal as defined by one or more visits to their website a month. Now consider that, billions of pages, thousands of websites, 11%. For many of us, we may as well, we'll likely think we should just throw our hands up and say, I just quit. If all these brands have this problem, how can I be successful? Actually, the opposite is true. What this says is if 11% of the people who are visiting websites once a month is the number. If we can get that number to 20%, if we can get 20% of our visitors, or 15%, or 14% of loyal visitors a month, that means we're 1.5 times more successful than most brands. And I venture a guess that these were mainly publishers they looked at. I venture a guess that for most content marketing websites, that's probably down in the single digits. So if you can get to this 11%, or much better, 15%, that means you're doing a great job. And so it's up to you to define loyal. Is it 5 times a month, 3 times a month, 6 times a year? So this is the number we have to keep in mind, 11%. How do we beat it? So Vulture.com did a study with Chartbeat, Chartbeat did a study with Vulture.com, and what they found was they wanted to find what made for a loyal viewer, what made for a loyal reader. And so they looked at things like page height, number of ads, number of images, anything that goes into a web page, the right sidebar, left sidebar content. And what they found was 5 times was the magic number. If they can get a person to visit their website 5 times in a month, they were going to be loyal from then on. So what that means is they could, if they could find a way to optimize their content so they can get me or you to visit 5 times a month, I was going to be a loyal visitor from then on. Loyal as defined by them as 5 times a month, which is great. What they found was the key was page height above the fold, meaning when somebody when their website loaded, the amount of text they saw above the fold was the biggest determinant of whether they came back. Now, for me or you, that's not going to be the case. It may be testimonials, it may be a video, it may be a type of image, it may be GIFs, but the key then becomes is finding the content attributes that lead to loyalty for your website. Again, for them, it was page height above the fold. But it opens up a door. It highlights for us, wow, if content loyalty is the goal, how do I find it? How do I define it? And so the process then becomes in looking at the types of content that you'll need to produce and share in your vertical. It may be why posts, it may be how-to posts, it may be infographics. But again, we have a target to hit, and we can start throwing stuff at it. And what I like to say is iterate. The goal is to try something for 30 days or 15 days, 3 months, whatever. And then if that doesn't work, try something else. So you may try how-to articles for 14 days or 28 days or 30 days. You may try video, you may try GIFs. Whatever it is to get those loyal readers, and then produce more of that types of content. The good news and bad news. The bad news is it takes a while. If you look at why most brands aren't successful in content marketing, it's because they don't give it enough time. What Vulture.com and Chartbeat found is it's a 12 to 17 month process, and that's true across the board. Joe Polisi had this quote last year, and it really sticks in my mind when he talks about most brands won't be successful in content marketing, and the reason why they won't be successful in content marketing, they won't give it enough time. They'll typically try a bunch of stuff without having clear goals in mind, and whenever they try doesn't work or doesn't work consistently and or effectively, they'll say it was a failure. when in reality they just didn't give it enough time. And I don't want us to fall for that. So I want us to say we're going to put in the legwork, and the legwork begins with the content audit. And for those of you who have done audits, you know how tortuous that can be. Your mind, you're thinking, you can't be serious. There has to be some other starting point besides an audit. And in reality, there is no other starting point but an audit. And we can take some of the pain out of it. This is a great audit template that's done by Mike King of iPollRank in New York. And it pulls in all the key metrics of how your content's performing. You know, the shares, any type of engagement that would be meaningful, the time on page, you know, the number of videos, the number of images clicked, the time spent there. And this is a template you download. It's an Excel document. You plug and play. It looks fairly complicated. It's not. It'll take some legwork, but it's doable. And again, audit is where you have to start. Whether this is the starting place for you or not, we'll talk about that a little later. But you have to start an audit. And if you are going to produce content, Ross Hudgens at Siege Media, which is one of my favorite content marketing brands, they do an amazing job. They're an agency, a boutique agency in California. He came up with this content marketing ROI calculator, which allows you to be able to demonstrate to your CMO or whatever C-level person that you'd be talking to, here's what we're going to produce, here's how much it's going to cost, here's what we're expected to get out of it. So before you produce any content, any new content after you have the audit in hand, this will point you the right way in saying, okay, here's what we should be doing, and if we do, here's how much it's going to cost, and here's the benefit as well. If you want to take a little easier route and don't want to do a full template, and a full audit, BuzzSumo is an amazing tool I really, really love. And you can plug in a website, you can plug in a URL, you can plug in a content type, a content category, and it'll highlight for you the content that's being shared widely online. It'll let you know where it's being shared, how well it's doing, and it'll open your eyes to maybe some content you should be producing. So BuzzSumo is a great place to get some ideas for the types of content you should be producing. And so, again, it gives you a pretty good topical analysis. It really breaks down social sharing for you. What it doesn't do a good job of, it also gives you some great input on the content type, whether it was an image, a GIF, a blog. It doesn't highlight domain. So you may be chasing the wrong rabbit, so to speak. It doesn't highlight for you, okay, this is the type of content you should be producing based on your vertical, based on your domain authority, based on your competition. It is, what I say, a great place to start. And so if you're just dipping your toe into content marketing, or you've been doing it for a while and you don't feel like you have a handle on it, I really, really, really like BuzzSumo for highlighting the types of content that may work for you. Something we've had at Moz for a while, and I really neglected using it at first, but I've come to love it, is something called One Metric. And this was done by our data team and Dr. Pete and our audience team, and it highlights for us how well a piece of content is producing. So One Metric is basically a way of agglomerating the key metrics that we think is important, like the number of shares and likes and comments, thumbs up, unique visitors, and it aggregates it to say, okay, based on all those things, we have now a number like this 80 here that means something to us because it's tying in the search, social, and content. And it can highlight for us the types of content that is done well and maybe we want to produce more of, the types of content that didn't do so well, and maybe next time it opens our eyes to some opportunities. Maybe this is a better way to do that next time if we do choose to produce that content. So we've been playing with that for a while. But last year we decided to roll it out for the entire world in a tool called Moz Content. And I've been playing around with it since basically last MozCon, and I got to say I love it. So what I like to say is it's a totally different product than BuzzSumo, but it's like BuzzSumo on steroids. It allows you to see not only how well your site's doing in relation to the competition, it highlights content opportunities across the web. So you can say, here's what my competition's doing, here's what I'm doing, here's some holes. You can say, okay, here's what other people are doing. I haven't produced any content in this area. Maybe I should. So it gives you a detailed analysis of what's happening across the web, and it ties in all the key metrics that we typically are familiar with from Moz Pro, from Moz Analytics. And so it really brings to bear Moz's full repertoire, full suite of tools to help content people, as I like to say, analyze the types of content they're producing or should be producing based on what the competition is having success with. Some of the things I really, really like, and I've been playing around with this on my website, is a topics analysis. So it'll highlight for you what's your website or what a website's known for. So when you look at a domain, when you look at a category, you look at a vertical, and you say, you know, I'm competing against them, but what am I competing against them on? So this highlights for you, here's what they're better known for, here's what I'm better known as, here's what we're really competing for or against one another on. So it allows you, if you think about it, Moz content allows you to really bore deep in getting a great look at the content landscape. But you're not just seeing the topography, you're seeing the topography holistically. You're not just seeing a surface view, you're getting to see some really depth, typically a lot deeper than most of us are used to looking. Another thing is Moz content search. And this really, really is cool, to where it says, here are the topics, here's the best content that's produced in those areas. And so this isn't a Google search. This highlights for you, here's what's produced, here's how well it's doing, here's the top producing content, and it really breaks out for you. You get to see why. Well, look at all the links, look at how much reach it had, look at how many people are sharing it, look at the specific people who are sharing, look at the people who are active talking about it, discussing it, who are listed as part of that content. So again, from a topography perspective, you're really boring pretty deep. I mean, you're mining for content at this point. You're really getting a well below surface view. And so what I like to say at this point, whether I'm talking to somebody face to face or I'm talking to a team, if you use Moz content, BuzzSumo, your own, think in terms of creating loyalty, building a community, going beyond just producing content, going beyond just producing content for an audience which may or not be loyal to you. Think in terms of, I can be successful, I just haven't yet. So take can't out of your vocabulary. Think haven't. And so what I like to leave people with is, you haven't been successful at content yet. That has nothing to do with your ability to be successful at content marketing. And so with that, I'd like to thank you for joining in.
Thank you. Okay, can you hear me? Okay, thank you for. I was very interested. I have a question actually. No, it's not a question.
Yes.
What was it? I think it was February, and I asked Rand about what he thinks about his tool, what you mentioned about content marketing and BuzzSumo, and he told me not to tell anyone on Moz. So you have to close your ears now. Okay, and he said he still thinks BuzzSumo is his preferable tool. It was February, maybe you improved a lot. What do you think?
Yes, absolutely. In February, I would have favored BuzzSumo. I didn't talk about Moz content a lot because when it was produced when it was unveiled last year, it was a beta. It was still in beta, and so there was a lot of features: the topics analysis, the keyword analysis, the audit feature, and that's one thing I didn't talk about. Where it really goes beyond BuzzSumo is the audit feature, where you can audit your site and keep all that information. Where you can come back and say, okay, here's what's performing well on my site, here's what's performing well on another content marketer site or another brand site, and I'm going to keep tabs on that. So the audit feature is really what sets it apart. But I had dinner with Rand earlier this year, and he said the same thing, and I would totally have agreed with him. But what I like to say, I still love BuzzSumo. I still recommend BuzzSumo. what I say is, if you need more, think in terms of using BuzzSumo as your place of beginning, and then going to Moz content when you need more and can do more. And you know, it isn't for everybody. The same way Moz content, BuzzSumo isn't for everybody.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Anyone has opinion or any other question? Yeah. Nothing to do with Buzz. So yeah, I just when you said so, I just mentioned here in comments. So maybe it would be a good idea to have more than BuzzSumo together here. Yeah, the battle of the Titans. Okay, Amel, do you have a question?
Yes.
You switch on
Hi,
your microphone.
yeah, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, good. So thank you for the presentation. It was really great. I liked the stat that you were showing. So I have a question about one of the slides about loyalty. So is there a specific type of content that creates good loyalty, like if you compare all the one that you showed in the slides?
No, and that's the key. You have to think in terms of your vertical, what the competition's having success with, and then what people expect from your brand. And so you begin to test that. And you know, for a lot of brands, it may not be text, it may not be video, it may not be GIFs, but for your specific brand, you'll find it. And that's what you ride like a horse. Because that's your avenue to not only loyalty, but that's your avenue for keeping the competition at bay. Because ultimately we want to find something that we're so much better than the competition at, that if they tried to chase us, it'd be so difficult, it'd be prohibitively expensive. And so in most cases, it's not going to be a blog, it's not going to be ebooks. If I had to distill it to one thing, if I could tell brands one thing, think in terms of having people on your staff that can talk about your brand, what you produce, and be likable people. So those are those subject matter experts that can produce the blogs and the videos, the podcast. And from there, be helpful in everything that you do. Be seen across the world, building that positive ubiquity. I talked to about 10 to 15 people over the course of a month, whether at brands or at agencies, who are really doing great jobs at content marketing. And I always say the same thing to them as a joke. This isn't particle physics. It's just a matter of people are choosing not to be successful because they're unwilling to do what it takes. And so that unwilling component, in a lot of cases, in a lot of instances, is being unwilling to test. And just about every brand I've ever worked with, they've been unwilling to go beyond text, meaning ebooks, blogs, case studies, white papers. And I'll say, videos will probably work really well for you because in this vertical they do, and you have positive ubiquity. And they're like, no, I don't want to do videos. So it's just testing.
Okay. So if you understand you correctly, it's since when you start, you don't know really what your audience is going to like, or which type of content will create loyalty. And so the first thing you need to do is to test. So you will create different type of content, video, ebook, white papers, and then you need to track everything so that you know which one is performing best. And then what you're saying is just focus on that. Put more your energy and your expertise on that specific type of content that's creating a lot of loyalty. And do we have to stop doing the other, or should we still keep doing the other type of content then?
Well, I'm glad you said that because I was going to forget to say something. Ultimately, what we're doing is trying to get beyond the audience. Audience can be stolen. Audience just means, it's like the whole engagement thing. That's great. And an audience for my song, they probably aren't going to buy my music, or they aren't going to read my blog consistently. But if those loyal people are part of the community, for example, when Moz creates a blog, or when I post a UMoz, there are people who set their morning clock by reading UMoz or Moz every morning. That's loyalty. That's not an audience. That's not people who may come into contact with the Moz blog and read it. So that's why loyalty has to be the goal for your content, because through that you see not what an audience would be loyal to. You see, you know what? my community really loves so-and-so content. I'll give you an example. On UMAS, it's tough on the authors because our audience really likes how-to actionable content. So somebody can really write a really great post, but there's no how-to or actionable element, and it's not personal. And I won't run a piece that's either not how-to and actionable or that's not a personal story. And so they're like, oh, you know, this is a great piece of content. I can't believe you won't run it. Search Engine Journal will run it. And I'm like, well, it's not that it's not good. It's just not ideal for our community. And so for an audience of people who, so it's just testing. And then once you have that loyal community, they'll let you know what they want.
Wow, that's actually powerful. I just I got the aha moment just right now. So thank you for that. So if I summarize everything, so if I summarize everything, it's we start with an audience. So we start with an audience. We start publishing content, different type, and then when we see a small part of that audience starting to be loyal to one or two type of content, then we start creating specific content for this specific small portion of the audience that we will from now on call a community or a tribe or whatever. So we'll take like one step level. So we have,
the key though is that you're pulling people who can help your brand. You heard a lot last year. Buffer talked about this. Copper Blogger talked about this. That they lost a significant amount of traffic because it wasn't shared. And I think it wasn't shared as frequently as their content wasn't shared as frequently as it had been. I think that's an audience problem. Where there was a lot of people who are like, oh, I really like Copy Blogger. I really like the content that Buffer's producing. Okay. They didn't focus on building the community. And what I mean by that is, where there's a subset of your audience that you say, I'm going to produce content specifically for them. The audience is still served, but they have broader needs. You're really saying, you know what, I'm really only going after these people. So think of it as you're a luxury car maker, and you're like, you know what, I don't want to be every brand of car. I don't want to serve every customer who needs a car. I want to serve the customer who wants this specific car, who has these three things. So you're really going broad to specific. So audience is very broad. That's people who could consume your content but may not, or they may not consume it consistently. A community not just consumes it, they share it, and they're passionate about it. They'll advocate for your brand as well. So that's what you're ultimately hoping for, and content can help you get there.
That's great. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, answers. Thank you.
Can I ask?
Sure, go ahead.
Hello, everybody again. Ronell, I have a question. So, as you know, key for success is a good content. So we should create good content for our blog, for our YouTube channel, for our email newsletter. But what about outreach marketing, creating good content for another blog?
Absolutely. In many cases, I'm sorry, cut you off.
Okay, I'm done.
Okay, that's just as important, and I see that's my biggest daily frustration, where people, especially people who haven't been at content marketing for a long time, and I haven't been at content marketing for a long time myself, but in the outreach, they're trying to build a great blog in the outreach, and they don't know what my expertise is. They're only focused on their needs. It's not a very well done email. It's too long. It's too vague. And then when they write a guest post, they don't do a good enough job of asking, well, will the people who took part in it share it? They just hope that they do. And we're all busy. We may read it, but we may not share it. But if you focus on people who are avid sharers, and you say, I want those people in my content, whether they have 5,000 or 5 million followers, that's a much better way. That's a much better return on your investment. Guest posting is an amazing way to build your credibility, to build your brand. And I'll give you an example. I neglected posting content on my website beginning in March of 2003. I was like, I have no people visiting my site. I was totally rebranding myself. And I only focused on two things: producing great content for other sites like Moz and HubSpot, and sharing other people's content. That's all I wanted to do. And so now if I produce content, it'll get shared more broadly than if I had just produced content for the 3 people who were reading my blog. So it's in a lot of ways being selfless. In a lot of ways, if you look at the best content marketers, they're all about helping other people. They're all about a part of being seen in a wider audience, but being active in a smaller, visible, and viable community. And that's what's really cool about content marketing, is finding your niche. But going beyond, and I hate that I said that. Too many of us are focused on finding our niche, when really what we want to do is find our tribe. Find that community that will help you gain steam, gain insight on the types of content you should be producing. They'll help you create it because they'll foster those ideas, and then they'll help you amplify it. You know what's great about that? You'll be doing the same for them. This is a symbiotic relationship, and we're all so isolated in our own silos so often. But we're part of an amazing community. I love search as much as I love content because so many people in SEO have been so helpful to me over the last 4 and 5 years. I love social because so many people have been so helpful to me. Same thing with content. I just think we have to focus on being a part of and building a community instead of building our daggone niche.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, okay, Moosa, it's your turn, I guess. You're muted. Moosa, we can't
Hello.
see you.
Oh, sorry. So you said, hello, am I going?
Okay, it's Moosa and then Rohan. Yeah, okay.
Oh, is it my turn or is it?
Ron, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead, Rohan.
Oh, okay. You said, Ronell, in the presentation you had one of these slides which said engagement should be one of the goals and not the goal, which obviously is loyalty. So are there any other metrics that support or enable you to get there eventually, that support loyalty or engagement? Should you be measuring any other important metrics with your content?
Absolutely, but what I like to say, and this isn't a cop-out, your content can only do so much. If you have a crappy product or service, great content isn't going to help that. So we have to think in terms of content is a help for your brand. And I've toyed with writing that blog for over 1.5 years now. So absolutely, things like time on site, things like overall engagement, whatever metrics will help you propel you towards your goal. But again, I know this sounds so simple. You have to have a goal for your content and a goal for your brand. For many of us, we're asking too much of content. We're saying, okay, we're going to post these blogs, and at the end of it, we're going to get X. When in reality, a lot of times the goal for a piece of content should be to produce a further positive association with and or for your brand. And so if you produce a piece of content and you're like, okay, what's the ROI? You use that ROI calculator, which I'll post this deck later. It'll be found in. And then you're like, you know what? I can say I met that or not. But it's up for you and your team to decide, okay, for this piece of content or for this campaign or for this element of a campaign, this is my specific goal. Now, Rand did a presentation recently where he talked about engagement is key, and that's true. And he's talking about something a little different. What he's saying was, too many times we can't produce content that garners engagement. People see your link because of the association they have with your brand, they click the back button. So he calls it the war against the back button. And that's true. So if we put it in context, engagement is a great starting place where people have a positive association with your brand and they click that link. But from there, it's for you and your team to decide what's the goal for your for each piece of content or for a campaign.
Wow, that answers my question exactly. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Moosa?
All right. So Ronald, we talked about loyalty, right? You all have to do is just to create a kind of blog that have the loyalty on it. We the one question that I have is that the kind of loyalty that the Mars main blog have, and because I recently wrote a post on UMass that shifted to the main blog. So the kind of activity I've seen, or the kind of retweets, I mean, that's just one of the factors that how it engages in the social sector on the UMass and on the main blog. That's a huge difference. I mean, if you shift to the main blog, the kind of retweets you get, the kind of traffic you get on your blog, and when you post a post on UMass, the kind of traffic and the kind of the social value you got on the UMass is really different. And it's a big difference. So same people working on the UMass, same people working on the main blog. Why is it different? Or is it the main blog that is blocking the loyalty of the UMass? Does that happen or what?
It's a totally different audience. So if you think about it, Moz has a very large community. There's always the people coming up from the bottom, the newbies.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of people who are loyal to Moz who have been around for a long time. And their association is with the main blog. And what they know is this. Not only are the quality going to be there, but the bigger names and the more in-depth content. UMass is not meant to in any way compete against the Moz blog, the main blog. That's not going to happen. UMass is a way for people to be involved, where it's always going to be a quality piece of content, but it's not going to be Rand, it's not going to be Will Reynolds, it's not going to be the Mike Kings. It's a place where a lot of people, and this is what's been amazing. Most people got their start, and you can go back and look at this years ago, got their start on UMass. That's where you start. Unless you're somebody that's well known, you made a big name for yourself, you'd had this killer presentation, you start on UMass. And that's the case even now. People come out and do a great presentation at MozCon or a Moz Talk or whatever. They'll come over on UMass. So the goal is, it's like a carrot we can dangle. We don't see it this way literally, but working with Felicia on the main blog and me heading the UMass, everybody wants to be on the main blog. And so I tell them the same things. Produce novel content, produce quality content, focus on answering questions that our audience would find valuable, meaningful. You're well on your way. So again, it's not that it's this unsolvable problem. What I tell people is, are you willing to put in the work? That's the biggest thing. You can make it. And I shouldn't say this. I'm confident most people can make it to the main blog. I'll share this story with you. One of the people, I won't call his name, there's a person on the main blog now who probably sent me the worst blog he sent me the worst blog I've probably ever seen. And I gave him the same feedback I give everybody. First of all, when I leave a comment on the blog, when it's rejected, I don't comment. I want you to email me, and that lets me know if you're serious. And then I basically break it down for you. Here's what we need to do in the future, meaning what you need to do in the future, basically. You have to decide whether you're going to put in the work or not. This person put in the work. His next piece of content and all the other pieces of content have all been on the main blog. All. And that was on him. So that highlighted my goal is not to have you do something you can't do. My job is to bring out the best you. I see myself as the UMass main editor is to help bring forward the best version of you. I'm not going to ask you for something you can't create. If all you can do is produce a piece of content that can barely make it to UMass and is never going to make it to Moz, that's fine. But that's a hurdle we got to cross first. But if it's within you, I can work with you and we can produce a piece of content that gets to the main blog. And so again, my job is simply to bring out the best the author has in him or her.
It's a smart choice, I guess.
I'm sorry?
I'm saying which is a smart choice. I guess you know it's a filter copy, so you have to work across this hurdle before going to the main blog. So it's a good thing.
Yeah. Or else it won't be a worthwhile reward.
Exactly.
And I don't see it as a reward. I mean, I think a UMass for a lot of people is it's a great place, but
I guess it's more like a drill that you have to cross that particular hurdle to move to the point where you actually why do you want it to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And for me, I want people to be like, I like UMass, but I want to be on the main. Okay, I can work with you. Let's see if we can do this. If you're willing to put in the work, I'm confident you have the ability. It's not an ability thing. One of my favorite books I read last year, it was so eye-opening. It was two Navy SEALs talking, and they had been through the most challenging training, SEAL Team 6. And they said something, of all the SEAL books, I'd never heard this. They said of the hundreds of people who fail every year for making the Navy SEAL team, not a single one lacked the ability. And I'm like, that's interesting. They said, no. Everyone that dropped out had it within them to do it. It's just they just lacked the willpower to withstand what it took. And I thought that was interesting. But when you look at it, that's true. If you break an arm, break a leg, get sick, you get to go back and do it over. But a lot of people just quit. They ring that bell because they're like, you know what? I don't want it this bad. And so for me, it's the same with content marketing, the same with UMass. It's how bad do you want it? If you want it bad enough, you're not going to stop till you're successful. And that's what I say. I made a promise to myself a month and a half ago that I only wanted to work with brands who were so committed to being successful that they didn't think in terms of what I'm not going to do. Because if you start thinking of what you're not going to do, that very thing is going to be front and center from the beginning, and you're just going to say, you know what? I don't want to be successful because I don't want to do that. So I'm not going to do that. And so it's a willpower thing. Success.
So that's actually leads to another question, actually. So especially when you're working with clients, or when you have an agency and you have a different kind of clients, and not every client is willing to invest the kind of amount to build an audience and then convert that audience into a loyal readership. So how to deal with them, how to explain that concept to them, and how to gauge it into the money area, obviously. So, I mean, not many people actually spend 6 months or a year of a time to figure out, all right, are we building the loyal kind of audience? They mostly need a tangible result to figure out if that particular thing is successful or not. So how to go about that?
Yeah, and typically if I'm working with an agency, because I do some consulting work with agencies, and as the main content strategy lead, typically they're not going to focus on an audience, and they're certainly not going to focus on a community. They're going to use paid media, right, to drive conversions, and they're going to produce content that may or may not be great. It's whatever they have the budget for. So where I begin is, what do you have a stomach for? Because that's all I can help you with. If you don't have a stomach for producing content that has the potential to earn links and over the long term gain consistent traffic, I can't help that. And that's in large part determined by, are they willing to put their money where their mouth is? What's the budget? But even within that, one of the things I'll say is, if say somebody says I only have $1,500 a month to produce content, I want to focus as much energy on that producing that piece of content. On sharing that content or outreach of that content as I do on producing that content. So we'll spend money on the design and the creation, but the promotion as well. So things like paid social, having people paying people to do effective outreach. So it's not a one and done. So if somebody says, I get this all the time from SEOs, like, okay, I want to hire you to do my content for me, but I can only pay you $1,500 a month. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to ask you how many pieces of content that can produce, because that's up to me. But I'm going to ask you, what are the expectations from this brand? Well, they need links. Like, okay, that's a problem. And they need traffic. That's less of a problem. But if their expectations are out of whack, then it's only so much I can help them. So typically we start off and I'll say, okay, I want to produce less content. So I want to have one big piece of content, and I want to produce as my quote-unquote anchor content, as Stone Temple Consulting calls it. And then I'm going to or cornerstone content. And then I'm going to produce some smaller pieces of content around it. So when people come back to the website, they can bounce from that piece of content to other pieces of relevant content and keep them on site longer. So for $1,500, I may say I'm going to spend $1,000 on a big piece of content with lots of graphics, great content, great text, maybe some video, and then link out to other pieces of amazing content. And then for the other $1,500, focus on the outreach and 2 small pieces of content. So the key with what I found is, unless you have an amazing team that is committed to delivering great content, focus on producing less content. And I didn't talk about that.
That's an interesting tradition. I'm quoting it.
My problem with that graphic I put up a minute ago is if you're failing at content marketing, producing more content as in engaging content shouldn't be your issue. Your issue should be producing content that resonates with an audience that helps build a community. But producing more of something, even if, because, I've seen this all the time, even with my own work, I produce content for a brand, and it does well for a while. It gets some consistent traffic. It may gain a link. So I'll extrapolate. I'll say this is the trajectory, and the trajectory looks like that. And I was like, you have all these sharing now, all these links now. That's not going to happen. Who's going to be doing outreach a year from now? You have all this traffic now. That's going to flatten out at some point. You have all this engagement now. Who's going to be driving engagement? What are they going to be engaging around? You're not going to produce any more content like this. You're not devoting the resources to doing so. So I think you have to be realistic and then work within your means. And if I'm working with an agency or if I'm in your position, I'm going to say, here's what can help them. And then I determine whether that's enough. And then I present this to them and I say, okay, here's what I can do for you, but it ain't going to help you. Or here's what I can do from you, and it will help you, but it won't help you long term. So, what I started doing a month and a half ago is I began this technique says where I talk to them in terms of here's what can kill you. So I say, here's what you're doing, here's how it's performing, here's what you should be doing, but here are the real threats to your brand from the competition. Or here are the real threats to your brand based on what's not been done from a technical SEO perspective, or based on the competitions that's coming online, based on what if I was a competitor I would or should be doing. So, and that kind of scares them up. That kind of gets them to thinking of, oh wow, this isn't what I should be doing. This is what I have to do if I want to remain viable. Because we all compare ourselves to the best. We all think in terms of, oh wow, look at what they're doing. But in the backs of our mind, we're all thinking, you know what? I'm at least better than my neighbor. I'm at least better than my closest competition. And when you can share with them, hey, you know what? You're doing fairly well, but you won't be doing fairly well in the very near future. And give them some real examples, that tends to get their attention. They may or may not pay me, but at least I've been honest with them.
Yeah, that's a point. I got it. Thanks, Ron. It was great meeting you, and it was a great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions?
Okay.
These are some great questions, by the way. I wish you all would have every one of my presentations.
I have a question.
Seriously.
Sure.
Okay.
Umar, did you say that you have a question?
Yeah.
Okay, go for it.
Okay, so Ronald, my question is basically, is content marketing is just about giving away free content? It's just about giving away free content? And the second question is, what about the sites who force reader to sign in order to rate their content? Are they losing a lot in terms of their share, in terms of their, loyalty and brand awareness?
I'll take those in order. The first question, content isn't the goal. And that's a huge problem with content marketing. We treat content as a goal. Content is a means to an end. Content is a way to derive relevance, to drive meaning, to create awareness with prospects and customers. And so, to a large extent, giving it away free makes it palatable. Because if somebody doesn't know something's valuable, it likely isn't valuable enough for them to pay for it. So it's not just about that. It's never about that. So you have to think in terms of, you know, what the goal is for your brand. And we didn't talk about this, but sometimes the goal is to not produce content. If you have a very strong domain, you have a great website, but it is a mess of content. Putting more content up may not be the goal. It may be fixing the content that's there. And so, you know, that's what I end up seeing a lot of times. You're working with a very big brand, and they've done some really sketchy things. They haven't really fully devoted to content marketing. It may be, hey, whoa, let's not produce more content. Let's focus on producing better content. And the way to do that is by listening to the audience we have now, seeing what percentage of that audience would likely be loyal by testing, trying to build a community. But while we're doing that, we're going to fix the content we have. And then we'll focus on producing more content. So I like to start there. And so it's never about the content. Content isn't the goal. The second is gated content. I began in content marketing in 2010 by producing gated content. I had a members only subscriber newsletter that sold for $250 a month. And the people who wanted that newsletter did not want me writing about that content elsewhere on the web. So I had to be very particular about that content being gated. I was willing to trade the links and the traffic, because I had none basically, for the income. By and large, though, you have to determine how much of a benefit is it for you and how annoying is it for viewers or would-be viewers. If you're making people sign up and you're always having these constant overlays that are, I'm going to give you this if you do this, I'll give you that. That's annoying, and it's likely running a percentage of your visitors off. The loyal viewers, the loyal visitors may be annoyed and may still come back, but over time, there's likely to be some wearing down. And I see that there's a couple of websites I read very consistently, but they do wear me down. And so you have to really be mindful of that. So gates, if you absolutely have to, if you feel like it works for your vertical, but be mindful that there's a trade-off.
Kristin?
Question?
Yeah. Hi. We're losing some of our panel, so I was just saying goodbye. Yeah. Okay. So my question that I wanted to dig a little bit deeper into, it's kind of like an observation, kind of like a pain point of my own. Trying to break into getting content out there. I love the Moz model, the UMoz, and everything that you were talking about that. And I wish that there were more people following that, because it really is difficult to break in. Anytime that like a new writer, I'll just use myself, when I started trying to get content published for my startup, people were like, well, where have you written before? A lot in Google Plus. Like, I've done a ton of video hangouts, but they want to see, you know, examples of professional writing, which of course I understand. And UMoz allows you to, you know, work in there, and I really appreciate that. Do you see that if other major brands were to take on that model, would that then what is the term that I'm looking for? Do you think it would compete, or do you think it would be healthy if others work, or do you think that it's logistically, like, do you think that it could happen? That
Absolutely.
someone could rise to that.
I see all competition as healthy. I see most of the blogs, whether it's Search Engine Journal, Search Engine Watch, ClickZ, obviously they want many of their authors to be vetted, but you know, it's really about finding a way. You know, I tell my kids, your goal is to get beyond no. We hear that all the time. Will Reynolds said last year at MozCon, hear no 5 times. What you really have to do is be the person who's standing behind the person who hears the last no. Because if you're that person who, when you're, and I gave my daughter this example yesterday. I said, you know, your problem is you never understand why I'm saying no. You hear me say no, and you say, okay, well, I just go off and do whatever. And I said, no. Well, if you just asked me, so I gave you an example. I said, you asked me to go to a concert. I said no. What you should have asked me is not ask me why, because I'm gonna say I'm not gonna answer that. I'm your parent. That's why. I'm gonna say you're too young, and then I'm gonna say, you know what? You can go to a concert, just not that one. And then I'm gonna say you can go to that concert when you're 16 or 17. So see, you've gotten beyond the no. When your sister heard no and stopped, your job is to stand there and say, oh, you know what? What can I get to? What can I get to? What can I get to? As a writer, I face the same battle. What your goal then becomes is find a question that people are asking online that nobody else is answering. So when you pitch that editor, and I've been an editor for most of my professional life, when you pitch that editor, you're going to make her life easy because she likely has a slate of stories that nobody will write, but you've identified a problem that she has or hasn't, but she has nobody to write this story. You're going to do it for her. And so she'll work alongside you, even if it's not going to be the best story. She's like, oh, you know, if she can write the story, I can help edit it. But if you're just pitching the same types of content, they're like, oh, I got people to write that. So again, your goal is to be the person who stands behind the person who hears the last no.
That's excellent. Yeah, because another thing that really stood out to me too about like what you're talking about is like the order of the pack, being willing to put in your dues.
Yeah,
and that's important.
So don't think about starting at Search Engine Watch or Search Engine Land or Marketing Land. Search Engine Journal will typically publish authors who maybe aren't vetted. If you can show them a piece of content you produce that's quality, and they feel like you will consistently produce that, that's a great entry point. If not, send them an idea that's so well thought out, not just a germ of an idea. Send them an idea that's so well thought out that they're like, I should give this person a chance, and then knock their socks off. The key is, and I always make it about content marketing, right? The key is, it's not that we can't have consistent success. We don't go into it thinking about consistency. Your goal is, once you open the door, is to knock it so wide open that it stays open for you. So once you write a piece of content, and I was the same way 4 years ago or 3 years ago. I hadn't written for anybody in the search world. I finally got a post on Search Engine Land, Search Engine Journal, and then more blogs started asking me to write. So much so that I didn't have time to write for them all. And so what I'll say is I'll share. One of my Moz teammates, Matt Roney, said this last year when we were in Boston last October. He said, your job is to say yes very often. Find a way to say yes often. So if you have an opportunity to go beyond producing Google Plus videos or Google Plus posts, seize it. Seize it. If you see somebody tweeting another author about being a part of a roundup, and you can contribute, send them an idea. They may not include you, but you may be a part of their repertoire later on. Like you may be a part of their author repertoire. Like, oh yeah, I have this list of authors. Let me reach out to her because I couldn't get so and so. And then once you have your foot in that door, you're all of a sudden a published author. So it's about knocking that door so far open it stays open for you.
Like consistently, like just showing up, being present.
Showing up
time that you're there, like they can't just continually ignore someone who's putting positive energy their way. Right?
It's like the person who knocks on your door every day. At some point, I'll share the story. This was shared by a minister over 5 years ago, and he said this. A friend of his owned these 2 bird dogs, and he goes out to feed them one day, and they're on a fence, and this bulldog comes up a path, and all of a sudden the bird dogs got away from the fence, They let the bulldog in, and they fought him. The bulldog was hungry. He was a stray. They fought him. They let the bulldog go. He goes back out the gate. Obviously, the two dogs won. The next day, the next evening, the exact same thing comes. The owner puts the food out. The two dogs converge. Here comes the other dog up the road. After 2 weeks of fighting, when that bulldog came up the path, those other two dogs were so tired of fighting him, even though they had won. They just gave up. Like, you know, I don't want to do this today. It's the same thing with keep bamming and bamming and bamming. You just keep bamming and bamming and bamming until somebody has to say yes. So it's about refusing to be ignored. And it's the same thing with brands and content marketing. If you're going to be there and you're going to focus on producing excellence, someone will notice. If you're going to just be there, and that's my problem with just showing up. If you're going to just be there, look forward to standing in line. There's a lot of people joining.
Right. Sure.
Okay, guys, yes, almost 1 hour and a half. Any last questions?
Do we get to have like a green room and keep picking his brain?
And you know what? We should have a community. I wish there was a community. That's what I love about Google Plus. Kristin, are we friends? Are we connected on Google Plus?
I'm not sure if we are. I know I follow you.
Yeah, I'm seeing your face.
Yeah, half a friend.
I love Hangouts. I love Hangouts, and I'm always in chat. I spend probably 10% of my day on chats, asking and answering questions. So I'm
Would you be willing to come on our Bill and Amon's Bogus Hangout? Like I know I'm punching through this, but I want to take the opportunity and ask if you would come on Bill and Amon's Bogus Hangout. We'd love to have you.
I'm sorry. Which hangout?
Bill Slosky and Ammon Johns. We have Bill and Amon's Bogus Hangout on Tuesday.
Oh yeah, I love that. So you run that one?
I'm part of it.
Yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes, she does.
I love
yes.
that. Absolutely. I love both of them. Bill Slosky is one of my heroes. I mean, I read his stuff. Sometimes I'm like, I don't know what he's talking about, but I love it. And I'm in a group with him, and I respect him so much. I'm like, wow. But those are the types of people that make me love content marketing. Those SEOs, those content people that are so willing to share their information, that have been so willing to say, hey, you may want to try this. I see you going on that path. So and so did this. You may want to talk to him. You may want to talk to her, and it's like, oh, you know what? That's what I love about this community. Search is so amazing. I love it.
Yeah. Oh, I also have another show on Fridays that we'd love to have you on with Terry Van Horn, who's another member with Bill and Ammon, and yeah, it's called This Week in Search.
Okay. Seriously,
Yeah,
as soon as we hang up
too.
here, I'm gonna ping you on a hangout. I'm gonna ping you on GChat. I want to make sure we get connected.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for like sharing everything like that you have today. It's been incredible.
I'm a serial sharer because I'm a serial stealer. I try to read 20,000 words a day. I often fall short, but I read a great deal. And I learn a great deal, and I love sharing it. So whatever is in this head, what little's up there, I've gotten it from somebody else. So
Yeah,
I'm not sure. It's not anything, amazing. It's just stuff that I borrow, and I try to distill it in some way.
So it's a great idea. We have to have you more often here. So
Yes.
you will be share your ideas as a speaker or as a guest. Yeah, as a guest. Guest
Yeah,
is not
absolutely.
that bad. It's not that bad, isn't it? Yeah. Okay, guys. If
Seriously, thank you all for joining in. It's so selfless of you to spend your time. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you for the
So
presentation.
it's 1 hour and a half. If you don't have more questions, I have to say thank you very much, all, and thank you, guys. We lost a few guys, but we thank them as well. So I hope I'll see you all again. Maybe in not this set, in different sets, and everybody who is still watching us, because it was a long one. Next week we have conference, and we will have Eric Enge and Mark Traphagen together, which is usual for people who are watching their show on YouTube, but it's not typical for conferences. So we'll have them. We'll have more other. We have Randy Milanovic, Ben Fisher, and Dustin Stout. So you're welcome to watch. Unfortunately, you can't be guests because it's a very different format. And we'll have another webinar. We have plenty of more webinars talking about putting Moz and Bass Sumo together in one cage. We will have Moz Hrefs and Majestic in one cage live. And Eric Enge is going to be hosting, moderating, refereeing, whatever you call it. So should be interesting. Just watch what we have. So thank you very much for everyone. Thank you. You stay here. We were going to go off air. Thank you very